So, just a sample there of the reaction there has been to the introduction of VAR into Scottish football. We asked for head of refereeing Crawford Allen to come into the studio today, but he is actually in the VAR room this afternoon. Delighted to say, though, we've been joined in the studio by Hugh Dallas, who is responsible for referee education at UEFA and who is also head of refereeing in Turkey. Good afternoon, Hugh. Thanks for coming in to Sports Sound. We heard some reaction from managers there. What are your thoughts on the early days of VAR in Scottish football?
Yeah, good afternoon, Kenny. It was very interesting to listen to the various links here you had and the various managers, and also the pundits, journalists, etc., all talking the same thing. That personally, looking at VAR this season, they brought it on very quickly. Okay, the training. If you look at the Premier League in England, they ran it offline for 2 years before they introduced it, where Scotland were very quick to get it up and running in October. A lot of hard work going on behind the scenes to get it running for October. But we've had very little issue with the actual VAR. The issue seems to have been the interpretation of the laws of the game. And Tom, I heard you actually speaking, Tom, about Law 12, about handball. And handball is really, really difficult. One referee will see it one way, and of course that's then up to the way the referees are educated, and it's very, very difficult to get a room who will all agree in a controversial decision. You'll split a room easily. Whether the arm is out, is it too far out? Has it made the body bigger? Is the arm above the shoulder? Is it in a natural position, for that action? So all these things have got to be taken into consideration before the referee on the field can make that split decision. But
would you accept, among the correct calls, there have been too many really poor decisions? A penalty not being given on the opening weekend of VAR at Tynecastle when the ball hit the arm of Michael Smith. I'm told they didn't look at all the video footage that was available. The penalty given for the Matt O'Reilly handball, I've seen the feedback that was sent to the refs that day. They were told wrong decision, should have gone to the screen, and no penalty awarded. We heard there the penalty given against Morton at Celtic Park in the Cup. The list goes on. What are your thoughts on what other pundits are saying are really poor mistakes to be making?
Yeah, I can accept, the examples that you've given there. I think the football world probably saw them the same way. The arm was out, for a handball, which was reviewed. These are the early stages of VAR. Referees are still finding their feet with it, and it won't solve all the issues, because referees will have a different opinion on what they see and from what you see. I agree that if they stick, I can only talk about UEFA, and in UEFA our guidelines are clear to our referees that they only get involved clear and obvious errors. As soon as you start to bring the bar down, I'll raise the bar higher, what happens there is you'll get more interpretation, you'll get more opinion, where if it's not a clear and obvious error, and you mentioned 1 or 2 handball incidents there, if it's not clear and obvious, don't get involved. That's what VAR has been introduced for. Again, I can talk about Turkey. 4 years now they've had it in Turkey, and the guys do really, really well. Big league, but they make mistakes. And what we need to keep reminding them is, look, that is not a clear and obvious error, so you shouldn't touch it.
We've seen some dreadful errors in England in the past couple of weeks, but they appear to have taken ownership. The people involved have been sanctioned. The managers have received an apology. Why on earth does that not happen here? Because time and again in this programme we hear from pundits, from managers, from fans getting in touch, saying, why on earth do we not hear from the referees?
Was ever thus, we were always asking that question about referees speaking after matches and giving explanations, which, to be honest, I don't agree.
You wouldn't back that?
I wouldn't back referees coming out after matches, no, because it wouldn't be a statement. It would then end up a discussion.
What about Howard Webb's approach in England?
Yeah, well, Howard is fresh. He's new in the job. He's decided maybe that's what he did when he was in the MLS, where he worked for 5 years. I know Howard very, very well. I noted today that one of the match officials involved last week has actually now left the company, the PGMOL. But it's fine apologising last week. What happened? if it happens this week again, do you apologise? Does it happen next week again? Clubs will only accept that so long. Personally, I don't think it's required. I think the managers know the mistakes have been made. I think the head of refereeing in England last week knew the mistakes had been made. Does apologise replace the points? Does it, take them further up the league? No, I'm afraid it doesn't.
Hugh, the clear and obvious thing is interesting, and it obviously, at its inception, VAR was supposed to be all about clear and obvious. You're saying it's supposed to still be about clear and obvious, but it's clearly not about clear and obvious, because a lot of the decisions we've had, some of the decisions we might have today, they're not clear and they're not obvious. They're marginal. They're a big toe might be offside. That's not clear and obvious. So I mean, are these referees still adhering to the clear and obvious, or have we gone away from that?
Well, Tom, I don't know what the instructions are for the Scottish referees. I can only talk about UEFA, and I can only talk about the league in Turkey, where we only touch clear and obvious errors.
Right.
Of course, it still creates controversy because clubs and presidents and they want the VAR to be involved because they think it's still a mistake. So I don't know what they've been told in Scotland at all. That they'll be following probably the guidelines given, but considering that VAR is in its early stages here, clear and obvious, it would definitely help the referees for sure.
One more from me, Tom, just before we bring our pundits in. We've seen decisions made by referees, VAR has been used, and a call has been made. Yet on 2 occasions, these decisions have been overturned by a panel. Tony Watt, red card. Nicky Clark, red card. That's not a great look, is it, for our officials, for VAR, and it's also got a huge impact on the refereeing team themselves.
Yeah, it certainly affects the confidence of the referees. I know the 2 incidents you're talking about. Both at the time the referee was given the angles that the VAR, centre produced. He looked at them. They thought they were red cards. They gave red cards, and then of course the panel overturned them. Now one of the instances the player had lunged into the challenge. That's why probably the referee gave the card. It's in the laws of the game, lunging. But the panel, the club, quite rightly exercised their need to appeal. The panel thought it wasn't, and we need to respect that decision.
See, I think there's an optics problem here, Hugh. I think a lot of fans, and I'd say if you did a straw poll of football supporters out there now, it'd be interesting to see what the results would be, pro-VAR or anti-VAR, or pro-law, handball law, as I said on that clip. I think a lot of this is to do with the handball law. The lack of transparency. Decisions are made and there's no explanation. I'm not saying the referee should come out after the game because, it's a pretty intense environment. But maybe a couple of days after, maybe the following week, come out and explain, because decisions are being made here and nobody knows why they're being made. Everyone's a bit confused. And these are the punters. These are paying punters, and they're watching. They're paying their money to get in the gate, and sometimes they're leaving. And going, what were these decisions about? And they're not told.
Yeah, and it was always like that, Tom. I can't sit here now and advocate that that we should be having referees coming out speaking, because I didn't want to do it when I was a referee, and I didn't want it when I was working at SFA. I was against it. Now I'm quite sure that the managers will be speaking to to Crawford on a Saturday night or on a Sunday or whenever it is, and Crawford will be giving explanations, but maybe he just wants to keep everything in-house, and I can fully appreciate what he's doing.
Hugh, I'm a solutions-based person.
Good.
How do we find consistency? For everything that we've just listened to, for the examples that we've heard, for the frustrations since October the 21st, from the debates, the discussions, you spoke about the educations, the differences in referees. How do we level it out? How do we get consistency?
I think one of the things which Kenny, you mentioned, that we've got 2 incidents overturned this season, and we're already in the middle of February. We're talking about 2 incidents regarding the challenges. So the handball law 12 is the most difficult law to interpret, and unfortunately every time they try to change it or tweak it, it creates another problem. Now, in the law, they talk about this sleeve, and they draw a little diagram of it.
Which is murder when you've got long sleeves, eh?
That's fine. That's fine for an examination purposes. You know, you can say if it hits here, then fine. But during live play, even if you try to stop or show a slow motion of a ball, the ball tends to blur a little. So that's just doesn't. That's not refereeing in the real world. There are guidelines there. UEFA also, the handball law, inside law 12, it's a very short law considering the amount of problems and issues that it causes. UEFA, we give guidelines to that law. I think I've got 4 or 5 PowerPoint pages, but it covers supporting arm out from the body above, you know, the consequence of jumping for a ball. But if the hand's high, there was an incident in Juventus on Thursday night where a penalty was just about to be awarded because the defender's arm was high. It came off Eddie's back to the ball, but the arm is still high. Now, they went to VAR and they found out that there was actually a push before the penalty incident, so of course then it was disallowed. But that's an example of the hand being above shoulder level. If players are going to jump in that way, the football has changed. I can hear players just now saying, but, you know, how can you jump without your arms up? And I accept that, but that's the law. We need to respect the law and say, if players respect the law, it will be easier for them, for sure.
We spoke yesterday, Hugh. You said to me there has been far too much hysteria from pundits around VAR, and too many of the pundits are not across the laws of the game. Do you want to expand on that?
No, I mean, I'll speak about the handball incident in the very first day of the season. You know, there was a handball incident and, you know, everybody accepted that it should have been a penalty awarded. The VAR saw it differently. But for me, the criteria of arm out from the body, making the body bigger, it definitely was not in a natural position. If you study it very carefully, you can actually see that the player dips, you know, he dips down.
Is that the Michael Smith one?
Yeah, and the left arm actually moves out. You know, and that is quite clear in the guidelines, that if the arm is out from the body and it makes the frame of the body bigger, it should be punished.
So I'm told that they didn't look at all the angles.
But in real time, you could almost see that. In real time, yes, you could see that the arm was out from the body from Michael Smith, and it was a penalty. What's perplexing people and infuriating people is that the matchday referee didn't see that, none of his officials saw it, and the VAR situation didn't pick it up.
The only thing I can say, Tom, is it was week 1, you know.
Sure.
And hopefully, you know, week 1, going into that, I know the referees would have been very, very nervous. The VARs would have been very nervous. It was an unbelievable game, you know. It was a fantastic match to watch. All sorts going on. And I think if it happened now, it would be called differently.
Can I ask, is there a danger here, Hugh, of VAR, a thing that was brought in to assist referees, is threatening to undermine referees' confidence? Doing exactly the opposite of what it was supposed to do.
I think we've got a lot of experience, you know, referees at the moment, and the experienced ones who are on the big matches, I think they're confident enough that they would not. They chat before the game. They'll have a chat today in Glasgow before the referees go out. They'll know what to get involved in and what not to get involved in. And I'm quite sure that if they stick to clear and obvious errors, then VAR will be the benefit.
Right, let's bring in Michael Stewart. Michael, you've been very critical of VAR since its introduction. You've also been critical of the referees, saying that they are not properly across the laws of the game, or certainly their interpretation of the laws is poor. What would you like to say to Hugh?
Well, of course they're across the laws of the game, Kenny. My issue is with the interpretation of the handball in particular. But just to pick up on a couple of things that Hugh said there, that you know, I don't think I can understand his reluctance when he's talking about Howard Webb, you know, apologising where he stopped. But it comes across as a bit arrogant, I think, that what do we need to apologise for? You know, there are some serious mistakes that are being made that are eventually going to cost clubs and cost people their jobs for these mistakes that are being made. And it costs very little just to, you know, give a little bit of, you know, almost empathy towards those people that are going to be in some serious trouble because of mistakes that are being made. And an apology costs nothing, is my view on it. Another thing I was going to say was that, you know, it isn't only handball, although that is quite clearly the biggest issue. We've just spoken about 2 sending-offs which have been rescinded by the panel. And Hugh's talking about a lunge from Nicky Clark. He didn't lunge. That's why it wasn't a red card. And we've all seen the replays, and I find it incredible that the narrative could still be that he lunged. There was no momentum, there was no force, and his leg didn't catch Ryan Jack with his studs. It was a shin on shin, which was a sore one, hence why the red card was rescinded. But you know, the handball law for me is quite simple. And we talk about Michael Smith, and this is where clearly opinions differ. Hugh's talking about how his arm goes out. His arm doesn't go out, his arm comes in, and it's as he's coming in that he catches the ball. And my view is that that was completely natural with the position that he was in, that his arm was where it was. It wasn't making it unnaturally bigger. The interpretation of the handball law is what is wrong, and we can talk about so many incidents. Bernabei at Celtic Park jumping up.
Michael's saying it's simple, Hugh.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
no.
is Michael one of the ones you're talking about when you say people are not across the laws of the game and they're coming on national radio and giving opinions?
Well, I mean, we've sat here, you know, we can watch matches throughout Europe, throughout the world, even during the World Cup, and of course in our domestic game. And how anybody can say that handball law is simple baffles me, to be very honest. I'm sorry, Michael, but the handball law is so difficult. It's meant to be made easier now with VAR. I accept that because they have a little bit breathing space to go and look at it again and see it. But handball law 12, even the international board will agree that law 12 handball is one of the most difficult laws to apply because it's so. It's really down to opinion and
so
you and I already have a difference in opinion.
Sorry, let me be clear. When I'm saying it's simple, what I'm trying to say is that the mistakes that are being made are simple. When you look at the mistakes that have been made, the examples that we've been given, you know, Bernabei jumps up at Celtic Park. He has no idea where the ball is. There's a header, it comes off his arm. These are simple mistakes, big mistakes. Huge. You talk about controversy. These are mistakes that should be not being made. As simple as that. The law, I hear what you're saying, it is difficult for people to interpret it. I don't find it difficult. I think that it should be, you know, fairly straightforward, but I totally appreciate that there's been a lot of difficulty because that's been self-evident. You talk about not being able to understand the laws. I'm very comfortable with the law, in that you're talking about unnaturally bigger. A lot of it, where I think is being misinterpreted, is they do see an arm out and they think instantly it's a penalty kick, without understanding how the body is moving. And that is what was brought in to try and clarify the law over a year ago now, when justifiable in that position because of that action that's been made by the player. And far too often, that is not taken into account and penalty kicks are being given.
I mean, the law states, Michael, that if a player's arm is above shoulder level, he then has a risk of being penalised. So it doesn't matter.
It's not specifically that. Do you want me to read out the law here?
No, I'm actually sitting reading it myself here.
Touches the ball or hand, arm when it is made their body unnaturally bigger. A player is considered to have made the body unnaturally bigger when the position of their hand or arm is not a consequence of or justifiable by the player's body movement for that specific situation.
Yep.
By having their hand or arm in such a position, the player takes a risk of their hand or arm being hit by the ball and being penalised. That, of course, encompasses the fact of it being above the shoulder. But this is my point, that you speak to any sportsman, any football player, they are not 99% of the time deliberately going to handball it. And on most occasions where these handballs have been given, they're simply playing the game of football and their arm is in a position as a consequence of the movement and they're being penalised.
Michael, you're not seeing the same errors across Europe, is that what you're saying? You're seeing more here around the handball laws in Scotland, is that what you're saying?
Well, I think it's quite clear that the handball law has caused the referees in Scotland a huge problem, and there have been massive
referees
mistakes
all around Europe, Michael. This is not a Scotland problem.
Look, Tom, handball law, and Kenny, you can give you the stats, is quite clearly, since the inception of VAR, caused a bigger problem here than elsewhere.
No,
Yeah.
I don't agree with
Hugh's
that.
shaking his head as well.
Is it? Well, Kenny, you want to give them the stats?
Yeah, we had the stats a few weeks ago. And Hugh, to be fair, the amount of penalties per game is doubled here.
Yeah.
And in England, after year one, they actually went down.
I accept that.
Right.
Accept the stats don't lie,
Right.
for sure. But what I'm saying is the same incidents were happening before VAR was introduced. The only difference now is VAR are picking these things up.
Aye,
Now,
but the mistakes,
they're not.
Hugh, that's the problem. They're mistakes that are being picked
Michael,
up.
just let me finish. I agree. I'm not in here to defend referee decisions and saying that they've got everything right. I accept that some of them, the interpretation has not been as accurate as I would
In Scotland,
like to see.
are you saying in Scotland?
No, I think it's everywhere. I think we've got maybe 4 or 5 handball incidents where we could question and say maybe the hand is not out as far as it should be. And the examples you've given, I fully accept. I'm not trying to defend that. But what I'm saying is VAR will of course, will now ask the referee to come and look at these things. But I'm back to the clear and obvious. If they stick to the clear and obvious, it definitely will reduce these issues.
How you, again, going back to consistency though, for me, I think as a reporter or a co-commentator, which I was on the day that the Ambrose penalty was awarded at Celtic Park, Craig Napier was the VAR referee that day, Kevin Clancy was the on-field referee. For 2.5 minutes, Craig Napier searched for a handball or a decision to be made. For me, straight off, as a player that's played the game, as a pundit across it, it was never a handball decision. Kevin Clancy then had the decision to go to the monitor and look at it and view it the way the rest of the world viewed it that day, or most people certainly out with Celtic Park, that it wasn't a penalty. Why are they coming to decisions like that? And the consistency element, do we need to have a team of referees that only do VAR? And do we need to have a team of referees that are on-field referees so that week by week we're at least having the same view on similar type situations?
Oh, I definitely think that will come, it'll come through time, that the people in the VAR, in the video operating room will be specialists. At the moment, we're talking about, 5 months that we've been running this for? Let's look at it in 5 years, because then there'll be more experience with the people that are operating it just now.
Andy Jackson on Twitter, he's a fan, he says it's not a positive. We speak about its failures as much, if not more, as on-field decisions prior to VAR coming in, and as a fan in the actual stadium, it's a shambles. Carol Glynn, as long as you're the same inept officials on VAR, it's always going to be